So once again, this is the final round of the Midseason Showdown Swiss, and we have on the bottom is going to be Carlos Martos, who is 3-1, and on the top or right side of the screen right now is Spencer Rast, who is 4-0. Both players playing for their spot and potentially their positioning in the top cut. So on Carlos's team, we have Arcanine, Snorlax, Drampa, Metagross, Smeargle, and Oranguru. On Spencer's side, we have Mimikyu, Snorlax, Porygon 2, Araquanid, Marowak, and Xurkitree. So both of these teams have a heavy Trick Room component. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Looking at team preview, I can say that Carlos is probably going to have a little bit of trouble muscling through Spencer's Marowak Alolan form, because the Marowak is going to be a Ghost Fire type, which means it's going to resist all of the normal type attacks that Carlos's team likely has, given that he has 4 normal type Pokemon. So Carlos opting to lead with Oranguru and Smeargle, while Spencer leads with Snorlax and Mimikyu. So both players have an opportunity, or have the ability, to set Trick Room right now. Most likely the Mimikyu's carrying Trick Room, given the team composition. However, it's a question of, is it going to be beneficial to do so? Smeargle threatening Fake Out, also threatening Spore into the Snorlax or the Mimikyu slot, kind of neutralizing a threat for a little bit. So while Carlos doesn't threaten a whole lot offensively right now, he definitely does have some threats in general. So Smeargle just goes straight for Endeavor, without taking any damage, as Oranguru goes for the Foul Play into Mimikyu. So that's not going to deal damage, but it will break Mimikyu's Disguise. And because Mimikyu did move second, it does look like it's going to go ahead and set Trick Room. So interesting to see Protect on Snorlax. That's a move that we don't see all the time on those. Most of the time they wind up filling up, the move that most people would use for Protect would be Recycle, to recycle the berries. But definitely a good play to make right there, because it did block the Spore from going off until after Trick Room is set, when Snorlax is not going to be slower than Smeargle. So Trick Room is up. Nobody's taken any damage, but Mimikyu's Disguise has been busted. And we did see, again, that Snorlax is carrying Protect. So we might see the rest of its moveset, but it's likely that it's missing something that's normally considered a staple. So Mimikyu switching out, coming into Marowak, as Snorlax goes for a Belly Drum. So that's going to put it at +6 attack, meaning it's going to be able to deal massive amounts of damage. However, we did see Foul Play coming out from Oranguru. So a Foul Play into Snorlax is going to deal a lot of damage. However, the Foul Play, it did go into Snorlax, and that deals right around 60%, as Smeargle goes for a final Gambit, which is going to be enough to KO that Snorlax. So Spencer felt like he was in a pretty safe place to Belly Drum, and winds up losing his Snorlax for his trouble. Final Gambit's a move I don't often see on Smeargle. Definitely interesting, and definitely see how it can help support the Trick Room option on the team, in order to, just quickly remove a threat without, to free up your setter to deal some damage. And now we see Drampa come in. Drampa's normally a special attacker. It's normal dragon type. I believe it can carry Surf. I imagine it's got something to be able to hit this Marowak for super effective damage, or else Carlos probably wouldn't have brought it in right here. Carlos opting to switch out Oranguru, bring in Snorlax. As Drampa goes for the Shadow Ball, so that will do super effective damage to Marowak, enough to pick up a KO on a critical hit, and that is huge, because now it's going to leave just 2 Pokemon. This Drampa is going to take an Ice Beam, dealing right around 50%, a little bit less than that, and Mimikyu is going to be forced to come back in. Now Mimikyu is obviously threatened because it's going to be slower than Drampa in Trick Room. Drampa is going to be able to outspeed the Mimikyu due to having the lower speed stat and be able to hit it with another super effective Shadow Ball. Snorlax, on the other hand, often carries normal moves only. It could potentially have a high horsepower, which would allow it to hit the opposing Mimikyu. And so Snorlax is almost very free to boost up right here. But it will depend, you know, Mimikyu could potentially survive and hit Drampa with a super effective fairy type move. As Snorlax goes for the curse, deciding I'm gonna get my defense, get my attack up, start setting up a curse. So that's an interesting difference we see between the two teams, is that while Carlos has a curse Snorlax, Spencer has a belly drum, as Mimikyu survives the Shadow Ball with just a sliver of health and is able to fire off a Play Rough into the Drampa slot, while Porygon 2 normally using Trick Room to set Trick Room, but this time using Trick Room to reverse it. So that's going to make Snorlax the slowest thing on the field again, with Mimikyu and Porygon 2 both being able to outspeed. However, Snorlax is at +1 for its defense, which is definitely going to pay off, taking hits from Mimikyu. We'll see what Porygon does. Porygon sometimes carries Toxic as a way to try and deal with Snorlax, and that's probably, you know, if Spencer has it, that's probably his best option. You know, besides hoping for a critical hit into the Snorlax. And Oranguru will be able to finish off that Mimikyu with a foul play. It could reset Trick Room again, or it could go for Instructs onto Snorlax to help it boost up its attack quicker than it would be able to do on its own. So we do see Shadows... there I have... Oh, Z Destiny Bond. Now there's a very interesting move, because it's going to force Snorlax to redirect into the Mimikyu if it attacks, and will be able to take it with it. However, Snorlax does go for a curse, while it looks like Oranguru is choosing to set Trick Room again. So I was a little surprised. I have to eat my words when I saw the Z Ghost coming out. Because I was like, why would you fire that off into two normal type Pokemon? That's not going to deal any damage. However, going for the Z Destiny Bond does make sense. It redirects to Mimikyu, meaning Mimikyu would have a much easier time taking something down with it. As Porygon 2 went for the Ice Beam into Oranguru, and it did like 10% or so, not very much damage at all, as Snorlax continues to just curse up, so it's now at +3 stages of attack. As Porygon 2 goes for another Ice Beam into Snorlax, and again, that tickled Snorlax, as Oranguru goes for the Instruct into the Snorlax, letting it boost yet again. So this Snorlax is now at +4. It's only going to take one more turn for it to be at +6. So it got to +6, you know, just like a... Belly Drum Lax relatively quickly, as Mimikyu this time goes for the Trick Room to undo Trick Room, forcing Snorlax to be, again, the slowest thing on the field. So this time we do see Mimikyu going for the Play Rough into the Oranguru, as Porygon also goes for an Ice Beam, also into the Oranguru. And so that gets it down to about 50%, as Oranguru instructs the Snorlax, going to give it another curse, bringing it to now +5. And Snorlax goes for curse on its own. So there you have it. Now we have a +6 Snorlax. It only took it 4 turns to do so. Or, yeah, I think it was 4 turns to do so, rather than 6. Not quite as quick as Belly Drum, but it did also get its defenses up, which is definitely important given that Mimikyu could be shooting off some Play Roughs into the Snorlax slot. And so we do see Mimikyu going for a play rough into Oranguru, gets it down to only 27 HP, but Oranguru eats its Pinch Berry. It's going to be able to come back up to around 75% health, as Oranguru finishes off the Mimikyu with a play rough, or not with a play rough, with a foul play, as Porygon 2 goes for the Ice Beam into Oranguru. We do see high horsepower coming from the Snorlax, so we do know that Snorlax is going to have a way to hit the Marowak, is going to have a way to hit the Mimikyu in these further games, and Spencer goes ahead and forfeits, knowing that he's not going to be able to deal enough damage. He's not going to be able to recover off the damage that Snorlax deals to him, being at +6 attack. So that's certainly interesting. Having the high horsepower definitely makes Marowak less threatening to this team than it otherwise would be. And so Spencer's going to have to figure out a way to play around that and to not let that Snorlax get set up. Maybe he needs to protect his own Snorlax a little bit better while he boosts it, so he doesn't just get foul played to death from that Oranguru. But that was also, speaking of foul play, was a very good move for Carlos to have. Because it was able to effectively deal with his opponent's Snorlax, dealing quite a bit of damage with it. So now going into Game 2, we're going to see how each of these players may have adjusted to what they've learned from their opponent, and what they've decided. Maybe what I used wasn't the most optimal way to go about this, or maybe what I brought worked and I just need to play it a little bit differently. So Spencer deciding, no, Mimikyu Snorlax is a good lead. I just maybe I didn't play it right. I do have some more information about my opponent, so I can make more informed decisions now. And Carlos, going with the mentality of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Oranguru Smeargle served him well in the first game. He really had no reason to switch it up right now. So I do imagine we're going to see a little bit different play from Spencer's side of the field here. Knowing that Smeargle has Final Gambit, there's a lot of potential for some different play, as he goes just straight for the Ghost Z move. Will it be a Ghost attack, or it is going to be, again, Z Destiny Bond? So that forces Smeargle to endeavor into the Mimikyu rather than into the Snorlax. And Mimikyu being a ghost type, it takes no damage from that normal type attack. So that does allow Snorlax to boost up to +6 attack without taking any damage. However, now Snorlax is still going to be threatened by that potential foul play plus Final Gambit play that Carlos is going to be able to make. So, he could go for a Protect and Trick Room with Mimikyu, but, if Carlos reads that and goes with the Trick Room on Oranguru to immediately reverse it. So we do see the Protect coming out on Snorlax, as Smeargle goes for the Final Gambit into the Snorlax, so that's going to fail on the Protect, and Oranguru also goes for the Foul Play into the Snorlax, while Mimikyu sets up Trick Room. So that is a really good turn for Spencer. He's able to sponge 2 attacks into the Protect and get Trick Room up, which is going to give his Snorlax a massive advantage here. It's going to be able to fire off a +6 attack into either one of these slots, and it will be faster than both of the Pokemon on Carlos' side of the field. So it's going to be able to deal a lot of damage this turn. So now we see Smeargle going for the Follow Me. So, it wants to protect his Oranguru, not let it take any damage, and so the return does go into the Smeargle, bringing it down to its Focus Sash. Meanwhile, Oranguru goes for the Foul Play into the Snorlax. That's going to deal about 70%, as Mimikyu also goes for a Play Rough into Carlos' Smeargle. And so that is enough to get rid of the Smeargle. leaving Snorlax on the field here. So in comes Drampa. Now Drampa is going to be a its speed is faster than Snorlax's normally. However, if Spencer didn't minimize the speed on his Snorlax and Carlos did minimize the speed on his Drampa, you know, there's the potential for that. Again, it turns it into, what did these trainers decide was the most important speed to hit? Did they want to have a little bit of a speed advantage outside of Trick Room? Did they want to have a little bit of speed advantage inside of Trick Room? And so that's going to determine who moves first here. But again, Snorlax is going to be very threatening to these two Pokemon. Being at +6 attack, it's going to be able to deal a lot of damage. As Snorlax goes for the self-destruct, so that's going to deal damage to both opposing Pokemon. It's going to be massive, and Snorlax goes down with it, but he takes two of his opponent's Pokemon down with him, so what a play there. I don't think I've seen a Snorlax using self-destruct, and that is a great way for Spencer to just eliminate these two threats. He's like, you know what, I don't want to pick who to attack, I'm just going to get them both. And well done by pairing it with a Mimikyu, you know, who is a ghost type and able to just freely take that attack. So now we see Xurkitree come out. Now Trick Room is still active. However, Spencer's Mimikyu is still has its disguise, so it's free to just undo Trick Room. So the Xurkitree does take a high horsepower, which dealt just more than 50%, which it healed back with its Citrus Berry. So it does look like it's going to be able to take another high horsepower, and it did get a Tail Glow up, which is going to bring its special attack up to very, very high levels, which is going to give it an opportunity to hit that Snorlax for a lot of damage. Now, he does go for the Protect, which I think is the smart play here, because Snorlax's high horsepower does have an increased crit chance, and so, you know, if that Xurkitree had to take a critical hit, it would have taken, it would have taken a lot of damage. Definitely not something he wants to deal with. However, because Snorlax cursed up, it's going to be able to KO that Xurkitree on this turn with the high horsepower. However, that also requires that Xurkitree doesn't KO Snorlax, which at +3 special attack, coming from its already very high special attack stat, that's no easy feat for Snorlax to survive, especially since Curse doesn't increase Snorlax's special defense to help it take the Thunderbolt that is likely incoming. So Xurkitree does go for a Thunderbolt into Snorlax, and it's not quite enough to KO, but it does bring it down to 25% HP, and Snorlax does go for the high horsepower, which connects with the Xurkitree and is enough to pick up the KO. However, Snorlax is going to be facing down a Porygon and a Mimikyu, and it's only at +1. It's not at +6 like it was in the last game, so it's not going to be able to deal as much damage. It's already low, and it's also paralyzed, so it's going to be outsped, and it looks like we just need to see some attacks connect with it to finish it off, and we'll go into Game 3. So there we go. Spencer takes Game 2, forcing a Game 3. And the big play there was the self-destruct from Snorlax, dealing a massive amount of damage, picking up 2 KOs while Trick Room was still active. So now we're going to jump into Game 3. Given that information, I do wonder if Carlos is going to stick with the Oranguru Smeargle lead, because that was pretty easily exploitable for Spencer once he knew what he was dealing with. However, it's all a matter of making the right reads at the right time. It was interesting to see that in that previous game, Carlos did stick with the same 4 that he used in Game 1, you know, deciding that, hey, this worked just fine. So it'll be interesting to see if Carlos decides to stick with what he had, or if he's going to use something different to try and work around what he thinks Spencer is bringing this game. So you see Spencer once again thinking Mimikyu Snorlax is doing well. I'm going to go ahead and lead with that. However, Carlos does decide to change it up. He brings Metagross and Arcanine. So this is big because Spencer's not going to be able to freely set up Trick Room on this lead. Arcanine breaks Disguise, and Metagross hits Mimikyu with a very powerful Steel-type attack. However, we have seen that Mimikyu is carrying that Ghostium Z item, so it could fire off the, I don't even know what the Ghost Z move is called. It could just fire off that into the, Metagross slot, but no, he decides once again to go for the, Destiny Bond, hoping that, you know, he gets double targeted, Mimikyu goes down to this Metagross and takes it with it. As Metagross does go for the Meteor Mash, that is going to go into the Mimikyu, and since it picks up the KO, that's a trade that I think Spencer was totally willing to make. He wants to get that Metagross off the field. Metagross is going to resist any of the normal type attacks that Snorlax would be firing off, and so that just gives him a free chance to get a Belly Drum off on his Snorlax. And then once again, eating that Pinch Berry, thanks to the Gluttony ability, only has to be at 50% rather than at 25% to eat that berry and get back up to nearly full HP. So in comes Marowak for Spencer. So Marowak is going to be able to be exploded next to no problem. But we'll see if that's what Spencer wants to go for. We don't know, again, if these Snorlaxes are, if they're the same speed, if one is a little bit faster than the other for dealing with it outside of Trick Room. But we don't see any Protect, so this Arcanine's going straight for a Flare Blitz into Spencer's Snorlax, deals just shy of 50%, as Marowak goes for the Bone Meringue into Arcanine. And that does look like it's enough to pick up the KO. And we do see that Spencer's Snorlax is going to be faster. That +6 return is going to be enough to pick up the KO on Carlos' Snorlax, and so that's going to leave whatever he brings in here, you know, versus the world. And again, so we do see Drampa coming out here, being able to fire off very powerful special type attacks, but it might not be able to overcome that Snorlax, who already has very high special defense as it is. So the Marowak's Flare Blitz does go before Drampa's. It's going to be a resisted hit, but Marowak still has very, very high attack, so it still deals around 40% to the Drampa, as Drampa goes for a Dragon Pulse into Snorlax. And that's just not quite enough to KO, as Snorlax goes for this last return, which is enough. At +6 attack, Snorlax has massive, massive attack. It is enough to pick up the KO, and so Spencer takes Game 3 and preserves his 5-0 victory. So Spencer definitely going to be playing later on tonight in Top Cut. Carlos is going to have to wait and see what his resistance is looking like. At 3-2, there's definitely a possibility for him to make it in, especially with Spencer being in his resistance, having that big 5-0 helping out your opponent's win percentage. So I think what I heard is they're going to be taking a dinner break, and we'll be back for Top Cut in some time.